She told the guy that I was her best friend. But we were never close. When I told her the truth, things got really crazy. My name is Alex, and to be honest, I never considered Sophia my best friend. We were close, yes, but not in the all-consuming, soul-bearing way people usually mean when they use that title. We had fun together, spent time in the same circles, went to brunch, texted often enough, but there was always a kind of surface-level politeness between us, an invisible line I never quite crossed. So it caught me completely off guard when I met her boyfriend Noah, and the first thing he said to me, smiling warmly, was, "Sophia's told me so much, you're her best friend, right?" I remember freezing for a second, unsure whether to correct him or just smile and nod. I chose the latter, mostly out of awkwardness. But something about it stuck with me. The way she had framed me in her world was far more intimate than how I had ever framed her in mine. And I didn't know it at the time, but that gap between how she saw me and how I saw her was about to become a much bigger problem than I ever expected. We met Sophia through mutual friends at a party about 5 years ago, one of those hazy, late summer nights where everyone seems like a good time and no one really remembers the details by morning. Since then, she had always just kind of been there, part of the group, always showing up to birthdays, game nights, the occasional road trip. We laughed together, sure, shared drinks and stories, but it was always in the context of the group, always within the safe, easy rhythm of being around mutual friends. We never spent time alone, never had any deeply personal conversations, and I couldn't tell you much about her that wasn't already common knowledge. There was no special intimacy between us, no late-night calls, no deep emotional confessions. She was just Sophia. Nice enough, social, kind of chaotic, always talking a little louder than necessary. That was our dynamic. So hearing that she had introduced me to her boyfriend as her best friend felt disorienting, like I'd missed a memo about a relationship I didn't even know I was in. A couple of years ago, out of nowhere, Sophia texted me and said she wanted to go on a date. It wasn't dramatic or overly flirty, just a straightforward message that caught me completely off guard. I had just gotten out of a relationship at the time, something long and messy that left me feeling emotionally wrung out, so I replied politely and told her I appreciated the offer but didn't think I was in the right headspace to start anything new. I braced myself for awkwardness, thinking it might change the dynamic between us, but surprisingly she wasn't offended. She took it well, said she understood, and we both moved on without making it weird. After that, things stayed the same. Friendly, familiar, occasional chats in the group thread, the same casual hangouts with mutual friends. It didn't feel like she held any resentment, and I never had a reason to question her intentions. Until recently. Everything was calm and mostly distant between us, just as it had always been, until Sophia started dating Noah. That's when something shifted, and suddenly she was texting me every day, as if overnight we had become as close as the title she had given me in front of him. She began sending me memes and TikToks, tagging me in things we'd never talked about before, asking what I thought of this or that, and suggesting we start watching a series together, even recommending ones I'd already seen, which made me wonder if she actually knew much about me at all. It felt strange, like she was trying to fast forward into a version of our friendship that had never existed. At first, I went along with it, thinking maybe she was just excited about her new relationship and in a more social mood. But the frequency, the timing, the sudden emotional availability, it all felt off, like it wasn't really about me at all. It struck me as strange, even unsettling, because in all the years I had known Sophia, she had never once taken the initiative to spend time with me one-on-one. Our dynamic had always existed within the safe boundaries of group settings, never veering into personal territory, and now suddenly she was acting like we had some kind of long-standing private connection. I kept my responses polite but distant, always finding a way to decline her invitations without creating tension. The truth was, I felt deeply uncomfortable hanging out with her alone, especially now that she was in a relationship. It didn't feel right, and not just because of Noah, but because it felt like I was being pulled into a narrative that wasn't mine, into a closeness she had invented for reasons I couldn't yet name. I wasn't interested in playing along with something that felt dishonest, and every new message from her only made that discomfort grow. Then one night at a party, in the middle of casual drinks and background music, Noah pulled me aside and asked if we could talk. He seemed calm at first, but there was a tension in his voice that made it clear this wasn't just small talk. He told me, with a careful sort of seriousness, that he was uncomfortable with what he described as my close friendship with Sophia. He said she often referred to me as her best friend and had even mentioned more than once that we spend time together like a couple. I remember staring at him, stunned, because none of it made sense. I hadn't spent time with Sophia alone in years, and I had turned down every invitation she had thrown my way since she started dating him. I tried to explain that, told him honestly that I had no idea where that story was coming from, but he just nodded slowly, like he wasn't entirely convinced. And for the first time, I realized that whatever was going on, it wasn't just about awkward texts or sudden friendliness. Sophia had been building a version of our relationship in his mind that didn't exist, and now I was being forced to answer for it. I was completely shocked not just by what Noah said, but by how calmly he laid it all out, like it was a pattern he had been tracking for a while. He told me that he had noticed we never actually hung out alone, which seemed strange to him given how often Sophia referred to me as her best friend. Then he added, almost like he was piecing together a puzzle, that she had told him she had invited me out several times and I had always refused, which, in his mind, must have meant something deeper was going on between us. Some unspoken history, unresolved tension, or mutual secrecy. I stood there, caught between disbelief and anger, trying to make sense of how I had ended up in this bizarre triangle. Everything he said was technically true. I hadn't hung out with her one-on-one, and I had refused every time, but the context he was given made it all sound like some mysterious emotional entanglement, not the simple boundary I had drawn out of respect for both of them. And in that moment, I realized how deeply Sophia had rewritten our dynamic to serve some narrative I'd never agreed to be part of. Noah looked genuinely confused, like he was trying to reconcile the person standing in front of him with the version of me Sophia had built in his head. He told me that he had asked her, more than once, to reduce how much she contacted me, to set some boundaries, not out of jealousy he said, but because it felt strange to him that she seemed more emotionally attached to someone she never actually spent time with. But every time he brought it up, she pushed back, insisting that I was her main source of support, her most trusted friend, and that cutting off contact with me would be too painful. She painted it as a non-negotiable part of her life, like I was some essential emotional pillar she couldn't live without. Hearing that made my stomach twist, not out of guilt but out of a deep, uneasy frustration. I hadn't asked to be anyone's emotional lifeline. I hadn't offered that closeness, encouraged it, or fed it. I had deliberately kept my distance. But somehow, I had been woven into a story where I was playing a central role without even knowing I was in the cast. I decided right then and there that I wasn't going to lie or sugarcoat anything. I owed Noah, at the very least, the truth. So I looked him in the eye and told him plainly, Sophia and I are just friends from a shared group, nothing more. We've never had any deep one-on-one connection, we don't spend evenings together, and she's never been my best friend. Not emotionally, not in practice, not in title. I explained that I had turned her down every time she tried to change that dynamic, not out of malice or coldness, but because it felt inappropriate, especially once she got into a serious relationship. I told him I had drawn those lines out of respect, not distance, and that everything else, everything she had told him, was coming from her, not from me. He stood there quietly, processing it all, and I could tell that something was beginning to click in his mind. Because once the pieces were laid out clearly, the picture they formed didn't match what he had been led to believe. The next day, Sophia called me in a fury, her voice already raised the moment I answered, as if she'd been rehearsing her anger all night. She didn't ask what I had said or how the conversation had gone. She went straight into accusations, shouting that I had ruined her relationship and made her look like a liar. She said I should have supported her version of the story, that as her best friend, I was supposed to back her up no matter what, and that by telling Noah the truth, I had burned her in front of her boyfriend. Her words were sharp, frantic, and full of blame, like I had betrayed some silent loyalty she had created in her head. I let her talk, stunned, holding the phone to my ear while realizing more clearly than ever that our entire friendship, if you could even call it that, had existed on a one-way street of projection and performance. I hadn't betrayed her. I had simply refused to carry the weight of her dishonesty. And now she was furious that the version of me she had invented wouldn't play along. I asked her directly, no hesitation in my voice, just a calm and honest question that had been building for days. Why did you lie to Noah? There was a pause on the line, a heavy silence that hung there for just a moment too long before she finally answered. And when she did, her voice wasn't even apologetic. She said she had been using me to make him jealous, to create the illusion of another emotional connection in her life so he would try harder, so he'd feel like he had something to lose. She admitted it plainly, like it was a strategy, not manipulation, as if dragging me into her emotional game without my consent was justifiable because it served some twisted version of love. I sat there in disbelief, stunned not just by her admission, but by how casually she said it, like I was a tool she could pick up and drop depending on how her relationship was going. And in that moment, I knew exactly who she was. Not a friend, not even close, but someone who had mistaken proximity for permission and had used my silence as an invitation to rewrite the truth. Sophia went on, her voice sharp with frustration, saying that Noah had become passive in the relationship, that he spent too much time playing video games, barely looked up from his phone, and had stopped putting in the effort that made her feel desired in the beginning. She said she felt invisible, like she was just a background character in his life, and so she decided to do something about it. That something was me. She admitted she had created a story about having an emotionally close friend, someone who supposedly understood her better than he did, someone who made her feel valued, and she used me to fill that role in the narrative, knowing it would strike a nerve. She said it wasn't about me specifically, that it could have been anyone, but I was convenient because I was already in their circle and safe enough to believe. The words made my skin crawl. I wasn't flattered. I was furious. Because while she was busy inventing drama to light a fire under her boyfriend, I had been stuck unknowingly playing a part in a relationship power play I never asked to be part of. I was just stunned, frozen in disbelief as she casually revealed the extent of what she had done. She had gone so far as to invent entire stories, tales about wine and painting nights at my apartment, quiet romantic evenings, where we supposedly talked for hours, bonding over deep conversations and shared glances, painting this picture of us as something more than friends. And all of it, every single detail, had been created without my knowledge, without my consent, and woven seamlessly into the version of her relationship she was feeding Noah. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, not just because she lied, but because she had taken the space I had carefully protected and turned it into the backdrop for her manipulation. It wasn't just reckless, it was invasive. She had used me, my home, and my silence as props in a story that was never hers to tell, and in doing so, she had crossed a line I didn't even know existed until it was already behind us. Later, Sophia confessed everything to Noah, maybe out of guilt, maybe because she realized the lie had spiraled too far, or maybe just because she no longer had any way to keep it going. Whatever her reason, she told him the truth, admitted to the manipulation, the jealousy games, the false intimacy she had built between us without ever letting me know. And they broke up. It wasn't dramatic or messy from what I heard, just a quiet, inevitable ending that had been building under the surface the whole time. I can't say I was happy about it because breakups are never something I take lightly, and I know how hard it can be to feel discarded, even when it's deserved. But I was relieved, for him, for myself, for the truth finally being laid bare. At least he knew now. At least I wasn't trapped in someone else's lie anymore. And as for me, I walked away from all of it with one lesson branded into my skin. When you feel yourself being used, when someone starts bending your silence into permission, speak up. Set the record straight. Because being polite should never come at the cost of your peace.